Hi guys, my name is Timo Maas and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm your host, Daz. This is my music and football episode where I bring on a DJ, producer, or musician to talk about the two loves, football and music. My next guest is an absolute legend in the game, and I always talk about like using the word legend. It gets banded about quite a bit, but this man to me is a legend. He used to co-own Fire Records and Fire 99 back in the early 2000s, and put out an incredible amount of music. One was Perception, which a lot of people will know, and was also on Sasha's Global Underground Ibiza mix CD, and one of my favorite tracks ever, Opera. I still play it today because it's absolutely phenomenal.
That's my wife's favorite.
It is. It's absolutely amazing.
That's my wife's favorite.
He's an Arsenal supporter, so we'll get into that. I'm so privileged to introduce Cass, and people will probably know him more as Cass&Slide with Peter Martin. But yeah, welcome to the pod, mate. I cannot wait to get into it with you about everything musical and everything football.
It is first of all, just a ridiculous intro. It's really kind of you. And secondly, I think it's probably going to be the only conversation over the next 3 months I have with a Liverpool fan that I'm going to enjoy. And that includes my brother and all the other Scousers in my football chat.
Yeah, I actually talked to these two lads called Cortez, and they're music producers. They're Arsenal supporters. They're based out of Manchester now. They make incredible music, but again, it's just it's one of those where I told them the same thing that I told you, before we press record, that I'm not going to say it yet. There's still matches to be played. You just don't know how this league goes. Anybody can beat anyone. That's the thing.
Like I said, I'm not a defeatist. It's not a question of trying to make the inevitable more palatable through kind of erroneous preparation. Mm-hmm. But Mo's having a season where, even as a confirmed Thierry Henry, acolyte, he's putting down numbers that are just extraordinary. 30 goals, 21 assists. But more than that, it's just that he's looking so dangerous that it just makes room for everybody else also, because you're just, everyone's like when Saka's on the top of his game, you're doubling up. If you're sensible enough, that has to be leaving a space somewhere else. But for Mo, it's just like out of nothing. Like one of those things he did the other day where I was watching the highlights and just brought the ball down, stood the guy up, just, made a foot, 2 feet, and you knew from a goalkeeper's perspective it's going top right, and the guy took the step and just it didn't even make a difference. And just repeat. So, like I say, I'm not a defeatist. I'm also not kind of, an extremist in terms of being a fan. I don't think it's the end of the world. We're second. Everybody just wants to have a team that feels like they're in the mix. So I don't understand this Arteta out or blah, blah, blah. It's like mistakes have been made. People make mistakes all the time. As Jamie Carragher said, he goes, we came second with Brennan and then we came eighth. No one stopped supporting Liverpool, said everybody out. It's, I think in the absence of any in-depth football knowledge, would I have liked us to have got Victor Osimhen for 65 if he could have come, and Nico Williams, if I would have let him go for 40? That seems like a good use of 100 when there was still a chance to win the league and Champions League. Yes. But in the day and age of data-driven Moneyball, where you know nothing about those players over and above the paragraph that's on the bit called gossip on the BBC website, you're not adding any value here. It's one step away from being Championship manager. Right? But in principle, you feel like, if we had done that, I would have felt more confident about this conversation. But I think in the absence of that, I don't think Arsenal are in a position to win every game. So you'd have to lose 3. Mo would have to explode. Virgil will have to do his cruciate. And and everybody else within the team isn't being carried. Everybody else is having the game of their lives. In fact, my Liverpool friend said the other day, he goes, was he at PSV before? No. Where was he?
Yeah, Feyenoord.
Yeah, Feyenoord, sorry, yeah. And they said that one of the key things that hasn't been mentioned yet is how few injuries he had there. So this kind of not necessarily heavy metal, let's call it Maroon 5 football, that's it just, people aren't out because he's not, it's not all of the time. So he's taken everything that was really great about it. Let Mo be Mo, allow Virgil to Rolls Royce his way around the back line with whoever's there. And as you said, in the prior section to this, whoever stood in the midfield has done a job. So in answer to your point, it's an awful lot of pluses on your side and just not quite enough on the Arsenal side, I don't think.
Well, I mean, to win the league, 38 games is the bread and butter of any Premier League football team.
100%.
You've got to have luck, especially with injuries. Last season, our injury list was just insane. At the start of this season, it was just insane as well. But yeah, it's the way Slot must be training them. Klopp used to train him, I think, twice a day. Like you said, it was heavy metal football from the minute you got on the pitch to 95 minutes. Slot seems to have gone rein him in a little bit. We seem like we're not even out of second gear a lot of these games because going, okay, we've got a 2-0 lead or 2-1. Let's just hold off while Klopp will be like, I want a third, I want a fourth goal. And I think this time around, the muscle injuries and barely anything for us. But yeah, you have to have luck with injuries, and Arsenal are going through this, because I think it'd be a lot closer. I really do. If Sasha, was back, if you had a few more players back. But I'm not going to complain where we're at. The
other side of that is that we came second twice as a result of barely having any injuries. Now, the first time round, I think Saliba got injured at the end, and you could possibly, as an annoyed Arsenal fan, speak to the drop off with a couple of games. Mistakes were made in the back line, therefore, but that's a lot of ifs and buts. We had 2 great years where hardly anyone got injured, and there, I think potentially what I would lay at Arteta and maybe the board in terms of the kind of absence of, it's not a question, are you setting a benchmark with someone like Declan Rice? And I have no idea of football finances over and above, Arsenal have just posted record finances and everything else, but PSR keeps changing consistently in order to try and hold off Newcastle and Man City just being dominant ongoing. So everyone else has to shuffle accordingly. And the Manchester United, whatever their turnover is, and I know they're managed horrendously currently, but to have to, even for there to be a vague chat that they've got to sell Mainu to buy Gorkarez, and you're like, this cannot be right. It's just it's madness. But for Arsenal, the thing I would lay at Arteta's door is our first 11 not only is great when it's playing well, but it's all we know. The Gabriel and Saliba being the best 2, arguably, again, maybe the Villa pair, maybe the Liverpool pair, but they're in the conversation for the best centre backs, in the country and in Europe. Played relentlessly. What are some of the numbers? Saka played 200 games, including Carabao. I know nothing about power loading, but when he talks about players being in the red zone, and then everybody plays all of the time until they're out, that seems weird, right? Well, but then it's, if, like with the Wenger situation, you're not aware of the mechanics in behind of, because the argument would be, if you'd gone and spent Declan Rice money 2 or 3 times in a row, we probably would be in a very, very, you'd got somebody who was arguably in the conversation for the best in their position, right? You got the 2 best centre backs, he took the balls, got Ramsdale, who was a great keeper and really great for Arsenal, and went, it's not good enough. Replaced him now with someone who's in the conversation with Alisson and Ederson. Then you've got, Odegaard, who, he's had a bit of a bad season, but still a really great player. People talk about him in a conjunction with when Kevin goes to Saudi Arabia or goes to, De Bruyne goes to the US. He's in that frame, despite his lack of trophies. You've got a lot going for it. But then to have taken your foot off the gas, not have invested, that's why it leaves us here. Why I don't have any faith in the ability to do it when you've got your front four out. We don't have that kind of depth.
Well, I mean, for Liverpool, it's you've got this strange balance, and it's a lot of football fans too that they we only got Chiesa in the summer, and obviously he hasn't really played, and you've got the Liverpool supporters going, why aren't FSG spending this amount of money? Why aren't we bringing? And I think, Slot said it in the beginning that he wanted to look at the squad, assess it, and see where it is. And look where we are, at top of the league, and doing well, and we're going to a final. And there's just too many overreactions from people these days. It's like they want to win the transfer trophy. Who can spend the most money? And it's not all about that. We as football supporters, we don't know the ins and outs of the accounts, the money. What's going on. Like you said, the PSR, it changes. They're trying to hold off City and Newcastle, but some football teams just need a little tweak, and I mean that's Liverpool this season. But
I think it's also because you've got two world-class players who, even at multiple millions, Virgil was 75. If that just seems, that's when it's like with the Declan thing. There was a huge amount of chat. 100, it's going to be like an absolute millstone. He'll never be able to get rid of it. It took 5-6 games. No one, they mentioned that no one's mentioning the money for a bit, then they stopped even mentioning that. And Virgil's above that. Like, when was the last time somebody went, Virgil was 75? Like, that's a joke. What was Mo? Is he 35? 40?
Yeah.
Chelsea reject?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure it's been a while since anyone said that. I mean, he's gone, Mo Salah has gone full Egyptian Benjamin Button. I mean, when Paul Scholes is on the overlap going, it's a bit much to say he's lost a yard of pace. When Paul Scholes is defending, a real Liverpool gonna get a statue soon legend, right? I mean, but that's what's required, And let's not forget that people say last year like it was ours to win. It was only like right up until the beginning of April, middle of March, where it was Liverpool were and then you had two bad results, and then it became, perpetuating from there. But right up until that minute, it's like as if that was erased because we came second. Like, I remember quite clearly, because I'm in a football chat, it was very, very, like, so it's not unusual. I think those who tipped Liverpool to do well this season, which wasn't many amongst the pundits, are like now just constantly reiterating that it wasn't as crazy as you think. I think any person denigrating Liverpool's chances at the beginning of the season were simply because they assumed, Gary Neville included, that the drop-off from Klopp would be massive, a la every example of the fucking graveyard that, Old Trafford is.
There's no Liverpool fan that can honestly say when August hit, we were going to win the league, or we were going to be up there challenging. Because, I didn't know anything about Slot. I really did. I knew Klopp left us in a really good position, as opposed to what, Sir Alex did with Man United. They won the league, but then he just left an aging squad, and they obviously went downhill from there. For us, we had the players. They just ran out of gas last year. That's the thing. Like you said, we in the last, it wasn't until April where we stumbled. So we were still challenging, but I had concerns, and I think the only pundit that said we were going to win the league was Frank LeBouf, the Chelsea fella.
Yeah.
He's the only one, and rightly so, because I mean, he probably got laughed at back in August when he was like, "Yeah,
maybe
Liverpool,
I should have." Because the one thing I did do prior to that, and I'm not, I hoped that we would win it and left it at that. Is I've never seen transition assets, and I have no idea what the algorithm does. Like Star Wars, Sasha, Hanan, Nick Warren mixes ideally over 6 hours, et cetera, et cetera. So I know what my feed looks like. But for whatever reason, because I started clicking on Liverpool, because I'd never seen a transition between one manager and another handled as well as Liverpool's was. And I say this as a confirmed Arsenal fan. Like, it was just from the the drone shot of him in the middle and then panning back and there being the 200 people, including the tea lady, one side of Anfield, to the way that he spoke about it, to the way that Arnold wasn't introduced until he'd had a real halo of departure. And then in he came, having been, given like a real on-ramp by him and a song from Jurgen and then that first interview he did and everything else. And I was like, this is fucking very, very cool. Like, it's objectively been handled really beautifully. So they just say what you like about not spending any money or not getting Zubizarreta or whatever else it is. It speaks to the competencies of the organization that something as complex as that could have been a disaster wasn't, and maybe potentially that sent the benchmark for all the fans going, okay, what have you got for us? And then coming out the traps, and suddenly by the time you're half a dozen in, and I remember the same chat, but they haven't been tested. They haven't been tested. I just kept saying it. And I think the killer when it was 2-2, when we were 2-0, and it went to 2, and I was like, that is really unfortunate. I bet you that is going to, I was like, it really will make a difference to them. And, much as I usually love being right, in this case, I hate the fact that, that felt important.
Oh, yeah, I believe it was as well. But I wanted to ask you, who was your footballing hero?
I think Ian Wright. Because when I played football at school and indeed in any location, my nickname's Spooner, which is hilarious. Is I wouldn't tell people like that my nickname was Spooner. It was only a matter of time before that would become my name. Like, if you're looking for anyone to, stick that fucker in the car park from 6 yards out, I'm your man. I like to think of myself as a cross between Patrick Vieira and Roy Keane. Get a latent sense of almost Hulk-like violence, just waiting to erupt needlessly in a friendly five-a-side. That I've got for you. But yeah, skill set, no. So just seeing someone like Ian Wright combine that kind of combative, spirit with kind of playfulness, with kind of like just effortless. And I just, I really, I had a lot of time for him. Obviously, Paul Davis, Rocky Rowe, because I think a lot of my heroes, comedy wise, were people of color. I think of Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy. So I was kind of, enamored of being in a London team where you were either Chelsea, Spurs and Arsenal. They just seemed to have a dynamic mix that felt like it was representative of my comedy heroes or my musical heroes or whatever else. And in terms of the greatest players I've ever seen, it's Dennis Bergkamp and Thierry Henry. I was talking to my friend the other day. So first of all, we were at that game where Overmars scored, which is constantly referenced on the overlap by Gary Neville with Roy Keane, like just him being upset every time Overmars is on the team sheet. And when we won 1-0, but also we were at Villa Park, arguably one of the greatest and most important football matches of all time. And my friend, who actually went on to be the head of David Beckham's communication for a decade, having worked with him at Ketchum, so he really is deeply involved in football on a kind of very intimate level, consistently blames me because I hid under his armpit for the penalty. And when it didn't go in, he said my lack of courage when the team needed it was directly responsible, and then also leaked out onto the pitch and empowered Ryan Giggs. I do remember that. I remember being in his armpit and just hearing people cheer who weren't near me and thinking, just no way this is good. So I think Dennis, because I've never seen anyone so slow create so much space with so little, like as if he had a force field around him. And that relationship he had with Freddie Lundberg, where it was like, these two have to be fucking each other. Like, there's no way. Like, whether one, you need even to know whether it's the guy with the red hair who's the spooner or the spoonie. But these two, I mean, their wives literally must just be like, when are you coming home? Because I think it was one where they had a game of about 20 run and he scored 13 or 14, right? And he just, that time where Freddie would go across the back, Dennis would just see it flat with that kind of reverse or straight, and Freddie would, and he would be so far, and you'd always think it was offside, and it never was. And it was just that. Obviously, the Newcastle goal, don't even think about telling me he didn't mean it. The Leicester hat trick, and then just Thierry. I remember because I was at that game where he scored, where he rolled Dennis Irwin, and everyone went, "Oh, this is not a winger." So those are some of my highlights of players I've been lucky enough to see. I had a season ticket for a couple of years, so I saw a lot of games, and then I found I wasn't going as much, so I stopped. I mean, but I've always been a fan. But seeing it, there is something to be said for seeing it in the stadium and seeing the way that players behave without the ball. Like when you speak to, you see the interviews with people like Pirlo and everything else. They talk about Paul Scholes, just dropping into spaces where they've no right to be, and just the ball being attracted to them like a magnet. But if it happens consistently, it's not luck. It's like my mate who's like a golfer, a single-digit golfer, Nick Byrne, his name is. And I remember first playing with him, and he kept putting things from 10 to 12 feet. And I got to the end of the round, and I went, "Oh, I see. It's not luck. This is your skill set." So having players who just did things where you're like, "This is unreal," and they made it like daily, or every time they played, there's something quite magic in that. And then of course, Tony Adams, Steve Bold, Martin Keown, Lee Dixon, Nigel Winterburn. The fact, and in the whole, we stopped eating pies and won another league. I love all that. And then. Just even, I think it was interesting. I think when, the Invincibles and everything else, just that team is a real, real shame. And I know it was slightly differential in terms of the timing, but just that we didn't win the Champions League. I think Arsenal's inability to have really, top drawer defensive personnel at Sol's level. Think about Stepanovs, Segan. They were always, Calamity Segan. He was always going to be one where he stepped up and everyone else stepped back, or everyone else was supposed to step back and he stepped. And it always resulted. I think I remember that game I was at Wembley when we were doing the games at Wembley, and Batistuta scored, and it was just seeing that. You were just so conscious of the differential between what was required and what was required of world-class players to be world-class versus players 1, 2, 3 steps down and then them having a bad game. So, I'm lucky. I've seen some truly, really, really great players, Cesc Fabregas also, but those would be my favourite thing. Ian Wright, Dennis, Patrick, Tony and Thierry. So I think that's quite the spine.
Well, I still live in the 1989 nightmare with Michael Thomas.
It's up for grabs now. It's up for grabs now. That was great.
Yeah, it's tough too because he obviously played for both Arsenal and Liverpool. But yeah, that still haunts me. But I'm sure the 2001 FA Cup final haunts you as well. The 2 Michael Owen goals. So tit for tat.
Was that Cardiff?
Yeah.
I was there. I was there for that.
Millennium Stadium.
Yeah, I was there for that. That was really quite unpleasant. But again,
you should have.
Yeah, but again, it's I always like, my thing is, I think the disappointment is when you're left with ifs and buts. You know, look, the classic, that's the hope that kills you and blah, 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 blah. But seeing people do great things is very rare. I leave and go, like, I think about some of the heists that we've had on the other side, like that FA Cup against, you know, Man United, where Vieira, I think, scores the final penalty, goes to penalty. That was an outrage, absolute outrage. We were battered. Like, they just absolutely should have just, you know, stomped it, and you walk away with it. You know, it's, I always, I want Arsenal to win, but I want to have my cake and eat it. It's like how I approach my golf. I'm not like, scoring is important. You know, it's not just that, oh, I want to play the, but I want to hit great shots. You know, I want to hit an island green from 130 yards with a nice flight. That's how I want to play the game. And that's how I like Arsenal to play the game. No, I've got no problem with 1-0 to the Arsenal. I can sing it with the best of them. But seeing players, you know, play well, and really seeing, you know, the beautiful game played beautifully, that's cake and eat it. You know, that's cake and eat it, I think. And that's those other players that we mentioned, you know, just to have seen them at all, just extraordinary. Like, just to have Dennis, where did he come from? Inter. You know, because was it, you know, people don't think, was it Bruce who bought him, or was it Stewart before Arsenal arrived? He was there before arrived. It was either one of the other, the two of them. But just to have him come and just unreal, and play him and Romford Pele, like Ray Parlour, you know, Des Bergkamp. I mean, that's every Championship Manager team I ever created. And with Thierry Henry, to have somebody who is, it's not incorrect to say, arguably the world's greatest footballer at that time, and not be laughed out of, you know, not be laughed out of the conversation. So yeah, we've been very, very fortunate. We have some great players now, perhaps not quite at that standard. And just, you know, you want your team to be in the mix. You have no God-given right to win anything. So that's why process always beats output. Because if you're watching great football, you're watching people give. It's why Liverpool fans, Newcastle fans, they just want to see people, you know, dripping in sweat for the shirt. And then if the win comes after that, that's absolutely fine. Because you assume, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the thing. You know, we don't have a God-given right to win every single football match. But if you see them out there giving 110% and we lose the game, then you go, fair enough, that team was better than us. Then, you know, I mean, I'm a Liverpool supporter, but I'm also a football supporter. You know, like watching good matches, and, you know, if it's even better, like, that's why I used to love watching the FA Cup, because, you know, you got the giant killers. You know, it's kind of lost its kind of, you know, esteem over the years, because the Champions League now is up there. Because the FA Cup was, you know, as you know, your whole family, you'd get up early in the morning, Saturday, do the whole pre-game stuff. You'd sit there, you know,
walking up Wembley Way.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're not going to the game, you'd watch it at home. You know, if you're lucky, you have cucumber sandwiches with cream cheese.
It was like a 6-hour broadcast.
Yeah, it was.
3 channels.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it worked up to the final. You'd see the coaches come up. You know, the players get out and walk on the pitch and everything. But nowadays, it's just kind of lost it. And I hope, you know, it comes back, because it's really great to see. You know, obviously Liverpool lost to Plymouth, but fair play to Plymouth. But, you know, that Liverpool team that was
I'm pretty sure. You didn't have 11 changes. Did you have 10 changes?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not like that. I'm always torn, like my feed, which seems to vacillate strangely between the Observer and the Daily Mail, right? For no reason of my own. Like, I abhor one of those periodicals, right? And I'm not sure the other one even exists anymore. But in principle, it seems to have a little bit of both ends of most spectrums. So I'm always torn between Jose Mourinho's every game counts, everything counts, and his methodology of winning the smaller trophies led to a belief that, you know, a winning mentality. Every game counts, every inch counts. It's Al Pacino any given Sunday. And also Arna's careful management of, if these guys can win and we can go all the way with these players, what's the point of having an extensive academy that's brought through the likes of Trent and so on and so forth, and then not give them their head to say, if you've got game, here's your chance. This kind of stuff matters, but I can't just burn out everybody else if we want to go deep in the Champions League and we don't have a winter break. And also, I've got to, as we always used to say, Dennis was a machine, because not only, on a glorious sun-filled day at Highbury, he could turn it on, but he could, if Ryan Shawcross wanted to come hunting him at Stoke, Dennis was happy to go toe to toe with him most of the time by not being where Ryan was. But, it's ugly beauty, right? And Arna's just decided, I've got to take some of the air out of this balloon, because last year there was a lot of quad chat. And where did that end up? With us having been winners and not being happy. So if you're hunting big game, some of the stuff has to go back in the water. And I'm not a professional football manager. He knows his team better than anybody. I don't know whether Jose's right or he's right. If he wins either the league or the Champions League, then I will probably become more weighted to perhaps he was right.
Well, I mean, if we win the league and the Champions League, nobody's going to be talking about the FA Cup exit against Plymouth.
No one's talking about it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those decisions that he made. But, I mean, I still think that team that he put out should have beaten Plymouth. We should have done. But, it's a double-edged sword too, though, because he's letting fringe players get minutes, which is what was needed. And our players,
who's your ready-made substitute for Trent?
Bradley, Conor Bradley.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's again whether, and a lot of this is, hold my hand up, ill-informed overlap, Sky Sports, snippet chat. But it's like whether it's a Trent, we're not being held over a barrel. Here's your 300 a week if you want to go to Real Madrid and not have to go to Newcastle and get absolutely mullered, in the rain and just want to ping passes to 4 people who can do 100 meters in under 10 seconds. How about it? But it won't be bigger than us. It's not a problem. Or it's the other side, and he is just a different kind of player and offers something else. And it's important for Arna to understand that we have to win without, a generational defensive, slash, midfield talent. Then again, it all just speaks to a great degree of kind of holistic competency that, looking in from the outside, starting from his introduction, it just feels very well managed, pun intended. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to get into your musical background now. Now, your roots and your influences. I always like to ask, what was playing in your house, your mum and dad? What were they into? Did that have an influence on you at all?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, my mum's very much a classical. She's into classical, a lot of opera. She's German, which means that a lot of operas last days, if not weeks, usually over very simple matters like a mistaken letter. I'm like, this is not 4 hours worth of singing. It's not. I'm sorry. Even in the absence of modern electronic communication, one missed letter does not require 4 hours of German anguish shouted at me in row 5. It does not. So yes and no. But from my dad's perspective, and I was talking about this the other day, he probably had a huge impact because he was really into not just science fiction. I think, look, you've only got to look around. I mean, it's just my office is filled full of, nerdgasm bits. But he and I had a real kind of bond over, yes, Star Wars, for sure, but just the music, like Jean-Michel Jarre for sure. But BBC Radiophonic Workshop, Doctor Who. I remember these things being very front and center, and I remember he loved the essence of vinyl. So it was the first Oxygen was the first vinyl he ever bought me, kind of in the late 70s. So I was only like 7th birthday, 8th birthday, and the way he gave it is like I love giving gifts, and I love whether it's for my kids, and I will lie for months or say they've sold out or buy them something, you just all sorts of nefarious things to have that moment of and he gave me that vinyl to go, oh, well, what will you play it on? And I remember it was like a really probably great. It had like it was an integrated record player, and then it had tape deck at the front where you push the button and it came out. And this is something exclusively for people of our age from a UK audience, like Arkwright's Till from Open All Hours. And it used to shoot out, and you could record on the tape. But they also had an integrated radio, and it was just like, it was brilliant. And I remember buying like David Bowie's Let's Dance, just going to Woolworths, just, I'm, despite still dressing like sort of Justin Bieber, I'm going to be 52 in 2 days' time. So I remember, just, I think the love of not just music, but the process around it, whether it was the appreciation of how it was made. I think, prior to the internet, prior to kind of that, there was a sort of wizardry and a magic in terms of how these sounds were created over and above not understanding specifically, or I understand Star Wars is impressive because violins or trumpets or whatever. That feels reasonably explanatory, but the nature of construction and just how Jean-Michel Jarre's music or Manuel Gotching or later on like Depeche Mode and anything like that, just what were the specifics of how you got to that over and above, I know what this is. It's like, going, back again to, like, if I hear, like, I was listening to something the other day, we were listening to it on the way back from London, kids were asleep in the back of the car, and we were listening to, like, I think Sasha had done 5 hours from somewhere in Denver. And I knew some of the records, like one or two. Like there was an old Ovum record from Josh Wink. There was something new that I'd heard somewhere else, and I was like, Hanan had played, and I was like, oh, this is very cool, and blah, blah, blah. But even now, having 200 producer credits, having DJed for a decade, his skill was so great, I was unable to tell where records began or ended, or whether he had 3 decks playing, or 1 or 4, or it was just the delay on the effects box from Pioneer. That's what music felt like. I've always been in love with that. And that skill, I think, was just really, like, my dad and I would geek out over it. And how do you think he did this? And then just the love of the kind of the strange juxtaposition between something super high tech and forward thinking, like Jean-Michel Jarre's music, and the love of, carefully opening the seal on a piece of vinyl by rubbing it gently on the carpet to create friction so that the seal remains together with the sticker on the outside, but you have access to the sleeve within. Like, I remember that like it was yesterday, and unfortunately it was not yesterday. So just, and then my grandparents, because my mum and dad got divorced when I was very young. My mum moved to Australia, taking her German CDs with her. Well, it was a German sort of Rosenkavalier vinyl with her at that stage. But my grandparents were also very appreciative of the fact that I really loved music. I remember them buying me Thriller on tape cassette. There's that one with Michael Jackson and there's that the tiger cub and the white jacket. Is it that one? Yeah, I think so. And just, I remember playing it over and over and over and over and over in the previously aforementioned Panasonic 3-in-1. So just, it was always very prevalent. I was always either like listening to music, and that then transitioned to just, Pete Tong just has been a big, part of my life forever. Like literally forever. Like, if I must have listened to his first, that Friday night, taping stuff, stopping it when Pete came on. No, that's really showing my age. But just, all of that just felt very much like a sort of testing ground, or and then, I love heavy hitters. I love Michael Jackson. I love Prince. I had a very, very obsessional relationship with Sign of the Times. Just that opening record and the feeling that could be elicited with so little production. That began a, again, thought process of how you can do so much with so little. I think I always remember, obviously, heavy hitters, which my dad loved, that he had, Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, just a lot of, Stevie Wonder. These things and are definitely the affinity for that was a real connection. I mean, yes, we met in clubs and everything else for my wife and everything else, having a similar mindset, but also, you know, just both geeking out at times where we were wrecked watching Chemical Brothers at Roundhouse. You know, it's strange how that flow of music and musicality, always with a kind of strange, you know, electronic core, has probably defined so much of what is really great in terms of what I remember about my life, whether it's the people I've loved, the people I'm still in love with. It's important to reference that. You know, even people I've met, music I've made, and people I've connected with. Yeah. So I mean, like I say, it's always been a part of my life. And I remember my dad very much. I was talking the other day with the kids about technology and how it doesn't feel like connecting with music doesn't feel like you have to make a commitment anymore. Everyone's a DJ. Everyone, you don't even need to buy the music anymore. So you don't even need to not have something to have this thing. Collecting is as much about denial as it is about obsession. I gave up smoking so that I could have every pair of Adidas Spezial, you know, neatly laid behind me, behind my homemade Liverpool, you know, triptych, and so on and so on. Right? Here are the things I couldn't have, because these are the things that are really important to me. And DJing really revels in that. The number of people who, it's expensive. Now it's not expensive, therefore the entry level. And I'm not kind of a Luddite, quite the opposite. And it's great that more of it is amatorized, or it's more open to more who previously were ring fenced out of it negatively, just purely because of the cost of entry. So again, like my feed, I'm kind of torn between one and the other. But I always remember, just, you know, always connecting with music, it always being a priority, always loving, I loved record sleeves. I love notes. I love fold out. I like a fold out that when you fold it out, it's got the bit in the cassette when you've taken the cassette out, and this bit's just, but then when you fold it out again, it's connected to the cover, or how, you know, just that, all of the things that are associated with music at its core, you know, have almost nothing other than a you know, positive and really deep felt affection for. So yeah, I think electronic from the off, you know, I remember my dad using I would go and see my mum in the summer, and he would buy me vinyl as a gift before I left. But then his gift would be that he would record it onto those dictaphone tapes. And I had the most ridiculous headphones where you had to open one side and then put the tape into the headphone. And the battery power on those was like an hour on 4 like C's. I mean, it weighed like the same as like a, you know, a Fiat Punto. It's like, but again, his love and his dedication and the coolness of doing that. And then he would always pretend, oh no, I didn't have time. And then hidden in my backpack, because I would go, you'd get dropped off at BA, they'd go, this kid's got no friends, no family, no one loves him, he's on his own card, which you'd hang around your neck. And then you'd go all the way to Australia on your own. I mean, again, this is dating me as much as like watching snooker in black and white. And just, you know, then I would open up my backpack, and there would be, and he used to read me stories, and they would be in there. So I would listen to the cassettes, and he, you know, pre-audio books. That's how prescient he was as concerns where technology was going. So yeah, so I just, whatever it was, all of those things are linked together. And just, it's always been important. You know, having my daughter, especially Ruby, my eldest daughter. I mean, they all do. Like Jack's got a very dad-related bass face, Chase and Status, drum and bass, Chemical Brothers, Underworld. You know, that there's a lot of that. But my daughter's got a very elegant, modern, millennial, Scissor, Kendrick, Doechii. Like, she introduced Doechii to us, to her credit, when the mixtape came out months and months and months ago. Now, obviously, she's had the monstrous, you know, Grammys glow up and so on. So everybody's a big fan. But she's like, there's something quite inspirational about having, you know, the next generation expose you to newness and being excited by it. Like, with the number of times, like, even though I'd had the album, she just kept playing. She'll DJ dinner and stuff like that, and it'll just be, you know, pulling out from 1,000 songs she's got, and then soundtrack it desperately with other younger children in the house, trying to keep there being too many N words whilst we're trying to eat like bangers and mash. And so, you know, can I keep the E on next to the tunes and Apple Music, like off the dinner playlist, but just exposing me to the joy of Frank Ocean's like Swim Good, to the point where now I will emo out in the car if I go anywhere for 5 minutes, just the love of that record and how she brought that to us, and now we both love it. Now we play it. It's such a, you know, proud parent moment that you've laid the groundwork. And, you know, both my wife and I, if she plays something that we know we will probably have suggested, both of us are like super like puffed out, like something from Blue Planet, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we know where that's come from. She's like, yeah, all right. So yeah, so even now, so from all the way from my dad, who unfortunately died before the kids were born, you know, all the way to now, I think being passionate, having a respect for, seeing the importance of, and music just being in the middle of so much that, you know, the number of times, like this, my wife's got so many great videos. Lisa's got so many great videos of the kids dancing just to music in the kitchen, from anything, like from Stevie to, you know, to just one of our really closest friends, who's one of my middle daughter's godmother, is Liz Miller, who's just one of the biggest names in the business. Really great. She was huge at Beatport, hugely instrumental in, you know, in validating and justifying MP3s, you know, as a business model. Then went to work for Richie at Minus. Then, you know, was at Big Beat, and is now like a monstrous, huge player at kind of Meta, head of brand partnerships. I'm pretty sure she's responsible. I can't remember who she told me, but Sabrina Carpenter, again, you know, head of the game, Chapel Roan, so funny. She played me like a couple of things, Chapel Roan, and goes, you know, you have 3 daughters. We know each other for 2 decades. She knows the kids all really well, always sends them something at Christmas, birthdays, everything else. And she was like, and I was like, yeah, not really sure about it. And she's like, you've got 3 daughters. I am telling you, Sabrina Carpenter, but especially Chapel Roan, considering what your family are like, it's not a nice to have, I'm telling you. And to her credit, 9 months later, there was me, my youngest, and my middle daughter singing Hot to Go in the car. And even though I wouldn't recommend it to any future generation, it was me with my iPhone driving like this whilst all 3 of us were attempting to do this whilst I drove the car. And I sent it to her and went, okay, I'll give you this one. So it's a kind of roundabout way of saying it's always been important. My dad was instrumental, and we're proud to have continued that legacy of, even if it wasn't my day job for a long time, it's always been hugely important.
Well, for you, was it DJing first or producing?
I think I DJ'd at university, where, you know, there was a lot of nonsense. So, you know, I was lucky. I went to Essex University. I just wanted to DJ. I loved the concept of it and the idea of it. But there was a very cool DJ group who used to put on house events and everything else. I was not part of that. I took what I could get. So I made myself the Graham Gold, or the, you know, not even the Judge Jules, the kind of, I played, you know, this how do, you know, and all, you know, and Here Comes the Hot Stepper, and, you know, anything to justify then playing the opening of No Good Start the Dance, but just the beginning bit, to see how long I could play those records back to back before people would complain that I wouldn't let the beat drop. And my friend who works for me now at Our Secret Lab, he's now, after 30 years of being friends, he's the director of special operations for Our Secret Lab, was also the head of security, the bounce at that thing. And he's like, he would come up and go, you fucking have to stop it, because I'm the one that's holding them back. It's like the zombie apocalypse out there. Chop, chop. So, yeah, so but more and more over the 2 or 3 years where I was DJing every night on the Friday in a place called the Dance Hall, which was like a car park underneath Essex University. It was like 2,000 students. I would reduce and try and compartmentalize other music as much as possible into quick, fast edits, so I could then play. I was only DJing for 2 or 3 hours, but I could play extended periods of, you know, Strictly Rhythm, Funky Green Dogs, and things that I was into. A lot of Prodigy, granted, a lot of breakbeat, that I wanted to play and had a target audience, or as he would say, a captive audience, and then played enough of kind of like a more diverse example to keep the rugby team happy, keep the ladies hockey team happy, you know, but so that a lot of James, Old Sit Down, a few Dexy's Midnight Runners, a few what would now be your bright sides, your Nirvanas, just shouty, jumpy, bourgeois mosh pit music. So yeah, that I started doing that, and when I left, I didn't get into music straight away, but I was, for many, just doing little gigs, small things, still playing records. But I had a job at a football magazine, strangely, which went out to all, I think, 40,000 teams there are in Britain that are registered with the FA. I think I've got that right. Because beyond the leagues that there's a whole raft of 7th division, Lincoln, blah, 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 that's still got 10 teams in it. So it's all that if you register with the FA, this magazine sold or was given to you, like you got 3 or 4 copies. So and my job was to sell advertising to anyone saying, if you sell football boots, here's your chance to be in charge, put in front of 40,000 people, and the magazine will be, in their lobby or in the ground or whatever. And I just kept applying, doing little bits of DJing, really small, totally meaningless, going to gigs, going to the Q Club in Birmingham, just looking at all the people that I really admired and just really wanting to do it. And then just remember it, in the Guardian jobs, I remember it again, tiny little, it was obviously what they could afford, tiny little advert for Flying Rhino. They want a label manager. And just, none of it would fly in today's connected age in terms of LinkedIn saying, it says you're responsible for, the Delta Heavy tour, but yet your LinkedIn best known, there's a lot of that chat. But managed to blag my way in, met Pete there and everything else. And then to a certain extent, a lot of what you probably recognize is it was born out of that. So yeah, so DJ'd, just wanted to get into the music business, just wanted to be closer and closer and closer to that thing that I really loved. Took whatever I could get and then made something out of that. And that's, we try to say that to the kids, is everybody wants to be creative. The passion is, can you be just resilient? It's to spend a year selling, football boot advertising for people who didn't want it, 500 quid for a court page. I remember it like it was yesterday. But you're doing it in service of the pursuit of something that, you feel it is, if not your destiny, is something that really is meaningful to you. So it didn't matter if it wasn't the thing. I was closer than I'd ever been before. And then you just take steps in that regard. And yeah, so DJ first for sure, then poor management of a record label. Although, again, I remember, I've got some bits and pieces, the Mixmag cover CD that I did, and, some CDs and other bits and pieces. But that was one of the things I do remember, was that there was an interview about 6 months after I took over, and we changed the logo, and all the wizards and the hippies and the 140 BPM plus crew were fucking livid, because I'd reached out to Danny Howells, sold him on the nature of the concept, said, we'd like you to be the first person to ever do a house mix in this, and he was really kind. I've always, known him for years. We haven't spoken in that much. I saw him at a gig the other day, and he was like super cool, classic Danny. And he was on board with the project, and he played a couple of Slinky Wizard records back in the day when trance, more sort of Danny Rampling on Radio 1 trance was still a thing. And I'm pretty sure he'd done a remix, and we'd done one other thing that felt like it was more akin to this entirely new concept. And we changed the logo, which was very acidic and very psychedelic, into a rhino that was made out of tessellated shapes. I've still got the demo hoodie that I made when it did. You can barely see the rhino on it, but in terms of price per wear, that bad boy's 30 years plus. It's yeah, and he had done that, and we'd had something else done, and out of nowhere, there was an interview with Danny Tenaglia in Mixmag or DJ or something of that nature, and someone had asked him, who's doing something that who have you got, da, 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 and what Kaz and the Flying Rhino crew are doing is brilliant. And just, you know, the day and age of, you know, it wasn't on socials, it wasn't anything else, it was in print, and someone had told me about it and spent 3 days attempting to use predictive text to tell me about it. Right. So just, yeah, you know, I think that felt like it was a real validation, you know. So again, just wanting to be involved in something that you love, wanting to push things forward for what you hope is the right reason, even if people don't understand it, or you're the only one that sees the output. Like, this is where I think we could get to. These are some of the things that, you know, we can husband the elements that brought the label to this point. It's not a question of denying your psychedelic roots, but it's a question of asking, what do we want to do? Who do we want to get involved? And wouldn't it be great if we could bring so many other people along for the ride and expose them to music that they weren't aware of for reasons that aren't necessarily necessary? Like, let's not give them reasons to discount this as go a trance. And that's so we can still be true to those values and have, you know, albums that are exclusively like that. But, you know, if you look at Ninja Tunes, no one's thinking that, you know, they've sold out their soul because Ben Bomber was on Anjuna and is now like delivering fantastic progressive, you know, house music in the best possible fashion. You know, and it's not, you know, a ginger bearded guy, you know, in a white bikini. It's like, you know, I think I had big dreams about what we could do. So yeah, so again, DJ first, then some management, and then into the production with Pete, and then that really fueled, I think, the combination of both. I think that was always the joy, is that I felt that if it was possible, those two agents could serve each other. You know, the just the greatest joy of having a record that you felt that you'd done in the studio that was good enough to warrant that kind of progressive, you know, like Sasha and John at their best, you know, Nick and Hanan and all those kind of people, where you feel like, oh, like they're the audio version of like Chris Pratt's character from the Lego movie, where they see, like, you could give a box of music to Danny. There's no way you're going to play it as well as Danny. Same music, right? And that's not because you're not great, but there's great and then there's great. You can be a great footballer, have a meaningful footballer. You know, it's only one line, it's only one Cristiano, so on and so on and so on. But to have made a record that you felt justified thinking the way they did in blocks. There's, you know, other DJs, you think about Radio 1, so a lot of people in the dance, every record had to do everything. It's got to have up, it's got to have down, it's got to have shouty, kitchen sink, drum roll out. Whereas these guys would make you wait an hour and then justify the wait because you're like, fucking hell, like, what is this record? Is this even one record? Like, there's magic in that. And to have the self-discipline to know that you can almost drive thousands of people to upset. You're back to the gift giving. I'm sorry, they've sold out. Right? It's all the same mentality. If you have that production, you did something. You know, with a great one, again, just thinking of the highlights of, so only Sasha and John had opera apart from me when I was playing quite a bit. And there was one time where they couldn't do Twilo when they'd been absolutely religious about doing it in New York, because I think they were doing two massive, super well paid, because I knew the promoter in Sydney, gigs, I think in Melbourne and Sydney. So that was enough that obviously it was so big, plus probably 2 weeks in the Gold Coast and so on and so on and so forth. So it was on the 29th, I think, of December, and I was scheduled to then play New Year's Eve in Mexico. And I remember it was me, Anthony Papa, who is again just another DJ who just so elegantly thinks in blocks. The good thing about watching Papa play is you get to places where you're like, where the fuck did we get here? At what point did we get into this? Like, I've got such a, you know, passionate appreciation for it, because it's just, I've got such a, you know, passionate appreciation for it, because it's just, I've got such a, you know, passionate appreciation for it, because it's just, there's real elegance, like, you know, the amount of work, not that's just gone into the technical ability of it, but to go deep on the music that you get. It's 4 or 5 hours every day, every week, to be able to pick the record that's right, not only for this block or this mood or this place or these people, but at this time. That intimacy. And so it was with me, Shem from Slacker, RIP, who was in the middle of only ever delivering heartbreaking bangers. Like, I had a discussion with Jerry from Hooge the other day, where every time we did a remix, they fucking got Shem to do, the Slacker did one, and it was just that little bit better. I think of Roaches was the classic example. Like, we delivered a mix that I thought was really good, and then they put Slackers on there because it was better than the original for a record that was almost as defining as Future. And I was like, oh, and I hated it, but I couldn't hate him, because I was like, this is so good. Like when Breeder was right at the top, where you were like, this is really great sound. This really does sound good on a good rig. You know, these people that you were just like, okay. But I've always seen that as a, okay. It makes me want to do good work. I love that. So to be in, and I, you know, in terms of a pecking order, it was me, and then it was Shem, and then it was Anthony. Like, he was the star. We were covering Sasha and John, which for me was, like, it's not my favorite gig. My two favorite gigs of all time are with Hanan, where we played Buenos Aires, Pasha, and Yellow in Tokyo. We played for 14 hours, 3 on, 3 off. Just amazing. But this is definitely quite high up. And I remember I was playing 3 hours, and I think Shem 2, and then, because I was playing first. And about 2 hours in, 2.5 hours in, place was packed. Absolutely packed. And I was saving opera for the end, like towards the end in my block. And I remember playing it. And I remember watching and thinking for the first time like a master builder, not just in terms of what I was doing, but in terms of what was happening in the crowd. And instantly I realized that this had become a big record for Sasha and John here. Nobody else had it. And everybody was suddenly, oh, fuck, it's his. Mm-hmm. Because at my ranking, there's no way he's the only other person to have this. There must be some. And 2,000 people came towards the booth, as in just passion. And that, like, I remember it now, that where something you did in the studio, and it took me a week to fucking get Pete to believe that the whales from, Star Trek 4 needed to be instrumental in the record we were doing as a follow-up to Perception, and that I wanted to draw the chords out of something organic, so that it took the pressure out of us trying to out-perception. And I remember giving you a big speech about how nature would do the heavy lifting. We were all doing a lot of drugs at the time. So, but it's like, this was my sales pitch to him. And then to see it there, and I remember it now when the riff came in and that kick comes in, and we always spoke about wanting it to be almost subliminally powerful, where most records, when they come back in, it's all over the top. Everything goes over the top. You kitchen sink it, as we call it. Like, just whatever you had, plus more, plus sidechain, plus. And we wanted it to be where occasionally you see it in some great progressive records, where the absence of things, people fill it with either noise or emotion. And having given them that riff and having the haunting nature of it, to have it come in underneath and then have that secondary moment be later, was part of that thinking. And to see it manifested there for the first time at that location, I will never forget that. So, just seeing those two things in perfect harmony is something I definitely miss. It's the thing I loved the most. It felt most special, especially if I'd gone to South America. And for a lot of people, like if you're playing in Mexico City or you're playing Guadalajara or wherever it is, they've spent 5 or 6 hours in a car to come. In many cases, if I was playing Mexico or City Juarez or anything like that, people from El Paso have come across the border to come to see you, Like, it's an effort. And to be able to share something that you've made and see them experience that, respond positively, and be really kind of moved by it, man, it's just, like I said, family aside, I was describing to someone the other day what it's like, and I was like, imagine if your life was like football. Let's make it relevant. But imagine that your best experiences are Premiership teams, right? And you have to, so they're in there, right? But it can be anything you've done, anything you've seen, anything you could dream of doing. So being Han Solo is Manchester United, is it right? DJing in that environment, when the sound's right, the crowd's right, you have music that nobody else has. It's like as if my Premiership had one team in it, and that's it. It's family first, and then I've been lucky enough, even for a short period of time, to do the number one thing I would ask to do over anything, real or otherwise. I've never experienced anything like it. It is viscerally the most enjoyment I've had as a human being, apart from being at the birth of my 4 children, or almost daily realizing how much I'm punching above my weight as concerns, just how epic my wife is. Those things separately, they're in a stratosphere that's really is undefinable. But this music, I tell you, even though I've left it as a daily passion for a while, its legacy lives long. Yeah, this legacy lives long.
Cass, it's so bizarre, obviously everyone was on, uppers, downers all around us back in the 2000s. But yeah. I can remember exactly where I was when I first heard opera, and Sasha played it. And I was never a chain spotter. I just wasn't, because I was lost in the music, on the dance floor. But it was honestly that one track where I had to know what it was. And I hounded him, like, constantly. I was like, I need to know what this track is. And obviously, everyone else is bothering him. But he actually told me the name of the track, and he said it was opera. He didn't let me know it was by you. But, eventually when it came out, I was like, holy shit. This is just incredible, because especially like your Fire label with Lee, you just the music that you put out on there, and who you signed as well, like Accession, the Vega track. Jesus Christ. It had everything that I've ever wanted, and it's exactly like opera. Everything that I want in a dance record was on that record, and on Vega as well. And it's just incredible. And can I ask you, like, with the Fire label, how come it only lasted like three years? Because I mean, I definitely understand, like, quality over quantity, because every release was spot on.
But I think there were a couple of reasons there. I think we were right on the cusp of the likes of Beatport and digital sales becoming really preeminent. And we were late to the game on that. That was costly. I think also, I think I've got one here. My wife actually found one. We were like in our kind of storage the other day, and just this, there's a great story that every time somebody bought a copy of the original Blue Monday, like Factory lost money. This is the living embodiment of what that actually looks like. This CD is so expensive. Like, if we'd sold 1 million of them, I wouldn't have made a penny. Like, all of the photo, like this image is not stock. Do you know how many times it took to shoot a bullet through a card that's fucking on its edge? Right? I mean, madness, absolute madness. And just all of it in here, like, but again, we wanted to do stuff that we loved, that, we felt like really inspired. I think for sure at that time. I think openly I would say that Lee is probably my favorite DJ of all time. I think what he's doing with All Day I Dream is great, but he's obviously made a decision that in order to take that next step, level up and build his own brand, he's going to own a thing. Lazily call it organic or melodic techno, whatever. And it's his, like, there are others who do it well. It's not progressive. It's like beautiful, dreamy, melodic, and it's like Sebastian Leger, Tim Green, Lee, and that's his thing. But when I met him, he if you think Papa could do it, he could. I've never seen anyone make something so disparate make work in the space of 2 or 3 records. And then correspondingly, when you had Craig in the mix and everything else, to see how someone obsessional about output, doing things for the right reason, design, and seeing it all come together. This is still sealed. I only got 3, so I'm not going to open it. But in here, I think, was pictures of me when I was a kid. And one of them is of me dressed as one of the guards. You know the Grenadier Guards with the bearskin? Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the red thing. With a gun that my dad had made that's just up here, that he'd made out of wood. He was an incredible craftsman. Stood outside my house guarding it for hours, pointlessly. Like, just because as soon as I heard that they weren't allowed to move, I was like, oh, that's the kind of nonsense I can get into. Hold my beer. And so there was a picture taken of it. And I remember telling that story to Craig after Fabric one time. And we'd gone back to his house and everything else. And then somehow he'd got a copy of this. I sent to him through promo from whoever was doing our promo and everything else. And we went to Fabric to watch a Tyrant gig. And he came and he played, and it was him, and it was Lee, and it was Sasha, and I was being annoying, sat in the booth. And I remember I would sit up where they stored their records and sit on the top so that I could see down, so I could see, just being annoying, but again, just wanting to be in the space where people I had a huge amount of time for were doing their thing. And it was about halfway through the night, and Craig just turned and went into his record box and pulled out a small Grenadier Guard, gave it to me and said, I just wanted to say how beautiful the packaging was on that CD. It's really great. And then went back to DJ. Just things like that. Just, I remember, again, it's people being passionate and creative and kind and thoughtful and meaningful and dedicated in and around one thing, and all of the little moments of magic that happen kind of around it. And then you think about Perception is a great example, because the story on that is pretty cool. So we'd done it, and it wasn't half the length, but I remember we had, I think Pete had, and as was often the case with me, because other people are on the tools, whether it's Tom, with Dead Set or Kaz and Mangan, or it's Pete, Cass&Slide, or with anyone that I've worked with, the assumption is that even if I'm driving the ideas or laying the groundwork or coming up with just hammering away with some bits and pieces and allowing them to tidy, that I need to be in charge of that bit to add value, because whatever I come up with, it passes through them. Their moment of inclusion is how they get to some of the ideas, sounds, constructs that we eventually end up with. And I remember it. So Pete had been on the desk and we had it laid out. And because I love talking so much and because I love pop culture, I've tried to bring in things that I feel speak to where I want to get, that have nothing to do with music. So I told him the idea that what I wanted it to be was like Perception was supposed to be like a magic trick. And the magic trick was that when that big first riff came, which we got loads of remixes that we did like that. There was a lot for 3-beat, where you were led into a path, the beat dragged off, there was a thing, and then fucking the Nord would just come crashing in, and you're like, my assumption is that if you're listening to this record, you're very high this is for you, right? You know, please don't drive home, right? So the records were made with that mentality. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a record where you were like, again, it's the same as gift giving. This is what you think you hid, but it's got to be good enough, that first part, that this is what you can't, okay, maybe only a one-time thing, but this is the thing. So we're going to run this out, and there you go. But then, this thing that you thought was the thing is not, it's like it's going to go forever. But Pete had said, look, no one's going to go for that. So that second break, which is really the thing, was about half the length. So it was all mapped out, ready to go. And Pete and I went for food in Notting Hill because his studio was in Kensal. So I live in Kensal Rise. He lived just like in Maida Vale. And we would go to Notting Hill for eats. There was a lot of like Mexican food. We came back. Everything gone. Nothing. There was one save that had like an 8-bar loop with all the components in it. It was nothing. Like just something from a movie, like a film. And Pete was like, oh man, it's like now an 8, 9 food coma. He's like, fuck it. No way. That's me out. And I was like, listen, let me spend, normally I'm laying down on the couch, snoozing, adding value. My name goes at the front. I'm the DJ. He's the one on the tools going, what do you mean by make it more crunchy? And he goes, I said, let's roll reverse. I know what I'm doing here. Let me map this out. And because he was like kipping at the thing, I made the break the length I wanted. So when he came back to the desk, he was like, fucking, this record's like 12 minutes long. What the fuck? And I was like, well, we're there now. And he was like, all right, fine, we'll map it out. So we map it out, do it. And I remember coming back to the next day and I was like, because what he did before we closed for business at the end of the day is, when I think about the equipment that we had and compression and kind of the elements of it, of how well he'd contained that bass at the end. It's still, if you listen to it now with modern technology and on a great sound system, it sounds a little woolly, but there's still, like when it comes in at the end and it finally, and the chord goes over the top and it comes in, like it's undeniable how powerful it is. Like, it's like in a big space, it's going to be like, and he just made that work. There was a lot, like socks in a drawer that's already at max capacity. He's like, just told me, I'm going to put 3 more in here. He just made that work. Then we mastered it down, put it on a tape, and I was like, okay, we'll get one for Lee, we'll get one for Sasha. It's not Craig's thing. He doesn't give a shit. If ever we've made a record that's not his thing, this record's it. But the other 2, they cover a ground that covers what he's into, but also other things. This feels like it's very relevant for them. And got the acetates cut. And I took one to Notting Hill Carnival, where the guys were playing at the Bonaparte, which was regular, which is why the B-side is called 3 Tyrants of the Bonaparte. That's why. And went in. The guys had it off. I'm pretty sure that Enzo, who's just restarting Cortona Music, I'm pretty sure I saw him post video footage from that gig in 99 or whatever it was. I'm pretty sure that's the gig, right? That's the gig. So I'm there, like I was in that crowd, and I was sat behind the boys again, just being annoying, looking at records I would never own, and the boys were playing rest of it, and I had the thing, and I had the acetate underneath the thing. Lee fucking giving me pelters because I hadn't brought one for him. Oh, yeah, it's the Welshman you love. Oh, yeah, I'm just a step up. Classic Burridge, right? So I had to fucking cover off all that. And then I left because smash face. Not having given the fucking acetate to Sasha. Was halfway home up the hill and went, oh. And again, so the other moment of even producing it, I was like, you could just send Lee a WhatsApp or what would have been a text message. I was like, I'm going to go back through a crowd that is exclusively going the other way, all the way back to the Bonaparte that's 6 deep outside. then have to go through the security in no way. Anyway, get in, blah, blah, get there. The guys are finishing. Give it to Sasha. He is like absolutely dripping his sweat, as are Craig and Lee, blah, blah, blah. He's not rude at all, but he's like, I'm just, this has been a really incredible gig, reasonably dismissive, puts it in the box, says thanks very much, mate, blah, blah, blah. Don't hear a thing. But then from the legend that, you get is that he was pretty set on how Ibiza was going to be, was in Ibiza, I think, recording it or whatever it was, and came across the acetate and was like, fucking hell, this record's fucking great. And put it on, taking something else that was in his mindset and in his construct. That's the legend I've heard. And I'm running, I've consistently gone with that. And I just think about, any of the, myriad of moments where you could have gone, fuck it. Or don't bother, or don't worry, or, it just never would have happened. And so much of what we did that was good, about whether it was Fire with Lee, which was just, born out of, I think, a shared sense of humor and a love of kind of a varied nature of music as much as anything else. But just being in and around tier one operators who are doing what you would want at a level you aspire to. It's like, again, bringing it back to football, it would be like as if your five-a-side team had Roy Keane and fucking Thierry in it. You'd be like, I'll always back myself. I think when I played, some of the gigs I played, I'm a really good DJ, but in a world of, there are a few great DJs, and I don't feel diminished by that. I think I still have a lot to give. It's why I want to do it. I love doing it. I think, my love of kind of making slightly disparate music work is, especially from a breakbeat point of view in a 4-floor world, there are plenty of proponents who do that exceptionally well. But, again, it's fighting to have that relevance and just not be diminished by the excellence of others, but see it as nothing more than inspiration. So having stuff like that just be included with people that you love, it's like, as I say, it's like making a 20-yard pass to someone who can chest it down. The rest of it, So that's a great story. I think I'm pretty sure my kids are pretty sick and tired of me telling.
Well, now everybody all know. I wanted to ask before we go. You spoke of you're going to get back in the studio again, which is so good to hear. Anything coming out in 25? Yeah,
there's going to be about currently 10 or 12 things.
Oh,
we've just done.
And again, to my ear.
Again, it was really nice because, getting back into it, there were a few things. The Loveland mixes that Hanan and Nick do, 22, 23, 24. There were a couple of extended things that I'd heard that John had done, that Patrice Bourmel had done, that Sasha had done. Just getting back into that concept of listening to that stuff repeatedly, not just, gym workout music, but all the time to understand the dynamics of what I know. What does it feel like now? What are the changes? Where are the commonalities? What feels like it's representative of how I view music, how I play music, how I produce music, and how those things sit together? And what does that feel like and look like or sound like now? So, like, we built something. Like, I'm quite happy to go in and go, I want to write something. Let's start with something that feels like it's for Nick, who has a kind of very, and again, I've got a really long time. I remember one of the most iconic things I'd ever heard that made me want to be a DJ was a Nick Warren, was it maybe Way Out West? Nick Warren, Way Out West Essential Mix. And he mixed something that wasn't like the most important music from Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, or something like that. And he put a track called Mondo Scuro, which is a breakbeat track, underneath it. And it was the most like fucking witchery. Like the first time you heard Northern Exposure and David Attenborough piped up and you went, you just clear my schedule. Just clear my schedule. Everything has to go. David's talking about hastily erected wooden shacks. Like, I must have listened to that album coming back, having played, or especially at the Cross, or just desperately attempting to put my feet on the ground after having been up for 2 or 3 days, thousands of times, like many others. Like, it's the ultimate record of, are we still out, or is the merry-go-round slowing? because this record feels like it could go either way, which is both really satisfying and comforting, but also feels like it's consistently dangerous. You know, that again, that hard kiss stuff where the anguish of the person, you know, just like James Lavelle's Cream live CD, even though like the Psychonauts did it, there are certain things. And Nick had done like that opening 45 minutes or hour of the mix he did like a Palapus. Just again, just like really effortless and organic and a master of his craft. And I remember having that on and on and on, and then wanting to write a couple of tracks that I felt sat within that ring fence. And working with Norm from Stripped, who had, you know, who was worked in a record store called Soul Man in Southend, where I used to go as a teenager with no real gigs, but go and buy records and just talk shit and just banter back and forth with him like endlessly. I'd go there all day because it was a fucking ball ache to get there. And so I would go spend all day there listening to every single record possible with him going full Human Traffic, telling me that Sasha was playing something, giving it to me and then charging me 20 quid. And just, so, you know, he was the one who heard me do something recently and said, listen, are you interested? Are you still doing stuff? Come and do some stuff. So he was the one who sent it to, you know, to Nick and to Petra at Soundgarden. And they came back pretty much straight away and goes, yeah, we love it. We'll sign both out at the end of the year. And again, despite now being in my early 50s, as opposed to my early 20s or my early 30s, it felt as satisfying and as enjoyable and as exciting and as, you know, as meaningful as it ever did. You know, maybe for different reasons, but just somebody who you admire, who does something that you love and does it really well, sees value in your addition to that world. It just, you know, it just doesn't get any better than that. You know, there are some things that I'm really, really excited about. As I said, I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to talk too much about it, but about Danny and the Bounder remix, I can tell you that I am re-looking at that. That's almost done. I'll allow Hanan to talk about that when he's ready. But yeah, it's nice. These things have happened quite quickly, and conversations that I've had with people who I was friends with and have admired for forever have felt very effortless to speak with for the first time in a long time. So yeah, now I want to do, which, you know, potentially I haven't done in the past, just do good work, repeat, see what happens, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I for one can't wait to you know, hear the new stuff. Like again, it's an absolute pleasure, you know, to talk to you about music, but about football as well. And you know, like I said, opera just it's just one of those tracks for me that just has stayed with me for a very long time. It's an incredible piece of work, and again, you know, we're in this day and age where music is, you know, especially with the younger generation, 3 to 4 minutes tops long, you know, and that's it. And I love, you know, the journey thing again gets banded about a lot, especially DJ wise.
Yeah.
But, you know, an 8 to 9 minute track that keeps it interesting is, again, that's what I'm all about, you know. And especially as you say, when you listen to the greats like Papa, Sasha, Digweed and Nick Warren, Hanan, they just weave these records together.
Yeah.
Seamless. I mean, you know, we can all get on our decks and try to recreate what we've heard them play, but there's no fucking way that we will ever sound like them, because they just have this ear, you know, incredible ears that just make these tracks sound so different from what we're listening to, you know.
I think that's because, you know, it's a legwork thing. It's an understanding of, you know, mechanics. You know, a lot of them have, you know, a musical background. I think from Nick's perspective, he's probably an absolute encyclopedia. He's like electronica John Peel, like that, and bringing that to bear effortlessly. Just it's who you are manifested through your art. And you listen to, we went to the not scene delete, the Da Vinci thing, with Sasha, where you put the, you have the, it's like you put blindfold on and then just listen to the music.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, again, just being inspired by people who are consistently not trading on the history of their excellence. They're all doing stuff that's interesting. They're all doing something new. That even if it feels like it's a commitment to progressive process, I haven't seen any of them play, whether it's online or in real life, and thought, "Are you just phoning it in for a check?" Mm-hmm. They're still, like, it really feels like they're working the monument for the love of what they do and for the benefit of those in the audience, and that is just undeniably, for want of a better phrase, a real turn on. It really just it's inspirational. So, like I said, seeing how great and how respectful and how kind of meaningful Sasha was with an audience that isn't necessarily his target market, or the kind of most educated. He didn't leave them shy of, if you want to know what this should look like, give me 2 hours of your time. I when I do it well, I feel like I have value to add. So the key thing is to add value.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to leave it there, because it seems like a really good place to leave it. Cass, like I said, it's been my honor to, again, these conversations go by so quickly. We've already been talking for an hour and a half, and it just seems, seamlessly when you've got something great to talk about. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I hope that some of it will make sense in review.
oh yeah, 100%. What I try not to do is edit at all.
Right.
Why would you? When it's such a good conversation and it flows, then there's no need to edit, and that's the great thing about these podcasts. My wife does the editing. She's the technology freak. I've just got the voice.
The fact that you air quoted the word technology leads me to believe you're not the editor.
Oh. Yeah, my hat, my hat goes off to my missus. She does all that, and she does it very well, and she puts up with me. So yeah, that's that's the
kind of chat that sounds very familiar.
Yeah. But I want to say thank you, everyone, for listening. Please like, subscribe, put your notifications on, and most importantly is take care of one another, and also put your earbuds on and listen to new music and listen to new artists, because they're out there and they need to get heard. Until next time, please stay safe and take care of yourselves.
Bye.